Here we go. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
So I changed my name.
What was it before?
No, because of the way I have to start the meeting, I show up as Kristen Taylor. I've always wanted to have like a cool name, I don't know, Sting or maybe, the Dread Pirate Robert. I could be the Dread Pirate.
Okay.
Okay, on that note, does anybody get that reference?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite movies.
I know, I like that.
I don't think I recognize that reference.
Princess Bride.
Oh, I never actually saw that.
Oh,
I know I need to.
I probably have a copy of it. And if
love
not, I'm sure
that
the
movie.
library does.
Wonderful movie.
Sitting for 2 hours paying attention to something is really difficult, so I don't get to watch too many movies.
Stand.
You know, Joey would love it too if he hasn't seen it.
Yeah, that we need to put that on our list. He also isn't great at sitting for movies, but
He will for this.
all right. I will definitely put it on our list then.
Okay. Oh, look who's joined us.
Hey, Lynn.
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm impressed by the backgrounds. I gotta say, Tim, yours is a closet door. Bob, you might be getting the prize. I'm telling you, just maybe.
Not a closet, a bathroom.
Okay, the bathroom. And I've got a messy office behind me, so
But it's so out of focus, we can't tell.
intentionally, trust me. Well, it's good to see you all.
Hi there. So, okay.
Barbara and Deborah have been stalwarts attending community preservation meetings. So thank you.
Some of it's been entertaining even.
Yes.
You can tell me more about that offline.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. More entertaining than expected.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not being impolite. I'm just eating my dinner, and I didn't want to.
So yes, joining me is Paul Spurn, who is the clerk of our committee. I'm not sure where you are on the agenda, and I know you haven't officially started the meeting yet. We're just talking, so.
Right. And there's iPhone 3 has joined us too. I don't know who that is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We don't know who you are.
It's Tony.
It's Tony.
Oh,
Tony, are you iPhone 3?
I am calling on an iPhone.
No, he's
I
the
don't know.
1781299.
Yep, that would be me.
I don't even see that one.
I don't see any iPhone 3.
I see a
Yeah, we do.
green telephone.
Oh, you know what? I have a suspicion here. I'll be right back. Chat amongst yourselves.
Very mysterious.
He disappeared into the waves.
I have a suspicion. I have heard tell we might actually see a little sun tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?
That would be nice. That would be great.
In our maritime climate.
You need an internet connection.
Question is, will there be sun on Monday for the eclipse? Not Monday.
Oh, it's
Monday?
The
no,
8th.
The 8th.
it's the 8th.
Oh, that's a long time away.
They're already making predictions and they're kind of, I don't know how they can make predictions that far out.
Don't.
I think I got rid of iPhone 3.
Yes, you did.
My suspicion was correct.
And that someone has disappeared. Someone very close to you has disappeared.
Did Deborah disappear or did iPhone 3 disappear?
Oh, she's not iPhone 3.
iPhone 3's gone.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, we're fine. We're good. So, all right. I think we have collected everyone we need to collect. So it is 6:33, right?
Have we decided who's taking minutes before we get going?
No, but we need to do that in short order. I was going to call the meeting to order first, then we can figure it out. So, present from the Finance Committee is definitely a quorum. Ben Slates, Deborah Warren, Tim Bell, Melanie Creighton, Barbara Beatty, Peter Barba, Joy has joined us. Dan E, I think is Dan McMacken. I don't know any other Dan E's.
That's me.
That's what I thought. And we're also joined by Lynn Spencer, Paul Spurn from the CPC, Tony and Allison, the town administrator and town accountant respectively. So that's what we got. So the meeting is in order at what, 6:34.
Yep.
Does anyone want to volunteer to do minutes?
I will.
Oh, well, thank you.
I haven't had to
Saved,
do it, so it's only fair.
Thank you.
saved by the bell.
Yes. Okay, so what? So just a quick report back on Tuesday night, right? We were chatting a bit about the library, and the takeaway was that I was going to meet with them. So we've had a meeting. I think we've made some really good progress. If you remember, there were two pieces to it, personnel piece, and then there was an expense piece specifically about circulation material. So the personnel piece is like settled, it's done, we're cool, we know where the revenue is coming from. The other side is a bit more complicated and we're working through it. And I'm hoping we can have something to report back by next week.
Bob, can I point something out about that?
Yeah.
I tried to make very clear in the minutes that although the head librarian sort of made the casual offer to not have the full increase that she would legally be due under the contract, she hasn't amended the contract. So
Yes.
we're going to need to have that before we do a final approval.
Yes, understood.
And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Okay. So I think that falls on Tony, well, somewhere collectively between Tony and Nori. And maybe Ann Spurn, I don't know. But it's not us.
And if there's any policy issue that they decide that it's a bad policy, then
Yes,
that will happen.
yes, understood. Okay, so let's move on. CPC. And Barbara and Deborah, you have been the liaison. So how would you prefer to do this? Do you want to do a little short introduction, or do we just turn this over to Lynn and her team?
Well, I think we might as well just get them started. It's been a pleasure to work with them. I think I sent you, and I hope you got them, the preview of the what they'll be talking about.
Okay.
Do you?
And,
Barbara,
and
what,
you know, it's been a great pleasure, and Lynn runs wonderful meetings. She has everything super well organized and, you know, follows along, so very
Well,
organized.
Well, thank you.
Are their meetings more fun than our meetings?
I didn't say fun. I said super organized, and she moves along very efficiently, but always in a very graceful manner.
Oh gosh.
Oh boy, you could be setting me up for tonight.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Oh boy, oh boy. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Deborah. Do you want me to just plow forward?
Jen?
Okay. I'd like to get the share screen opportunity.
Certainly.
Okay.
Multiple participants can share, should be able to share now.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is start with our spreadsheet. I'm not as adept at this as Paul is. Can you see our spreadsheet?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing it big, but I've got it on another screen, so I'll do it this way. So
You're down at the bottom, Lynn.
I'm sorry?
You want to start at the bottom? Is that where you're intending to start?
Yes,
Okay, fine.
actually.
I'll keep
Yeah.
quiet. Bye.
Okay. No, you have been the one that has managed this while I've been doing the meetings, Paul. So I could be been running the meetings and taking the minutes. Just want to get some points on that one.
Yeah.
So we use this spreadsheet as a way of tracking information on on the applications. And this year we received over $900,000 of applications. So it was a very a banner year. But to give you context for this, we have, in terms of funds available, and we have to keep this clearly in mind for us, in terms of funds available, we have approximately $435,000 projected for fiscal year 2025. That is based on a 3% surcharge on our real estate tax, which brings in $290,379. We're projecting a 50% state match. So that's how we get to the 435. In terms of available general reserve, we have just over $169,000 available. We have a housing reserve, which started out at 53,000, and we're going to draw a little bit out of that to help fund one of these grant applications. We also have just over $18,000 in interest that is accrued on the general reserves. And then we are looking at about $8,000 of quote clawbacks, grants that have been out for a while that have been completed, and we can legitimately bring them back into the general reserve. So, we have, I don't know, $620,000 excluding the community housing reserve. We can't count that in terms of making grants except for that purpose. So you can see that we have, we had a lot of demand and we have limited funds. And we do like to, as a matter of practice, maintain a general reserve of at least $100,000. What we found as we actually worked with our grant applicants is that we had a number of them either withdraw or say they could do it in the future. Or in the case of two of our grant applicants, we found that they were not eligible for this particular grant program. That may have made for some of the lively discussion. So I will just sort of take you through the articles per se, but I'm just showing you this spreadsheet as a tracking device that we use as a planning tool. So now I will actually stop that. And unless you have any further questions, I can actually show you the articles that we've drafted themselves. Are you ready for that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Head nods. Good. I want to make sure that I'm in the right place. Are you seeing the articles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you make it bigger by any chance?
Can I make it?
Yeah, the thing in the lower right-hand corner, there's a slider thing.
See, I'm seeing it very, very tiny,
Hmm,
but I am not seeing the slider thing.
no.
Not
Paul, do
seeing
you have any intelligence on this?
Oh dear, because I don't know what you're looking at. So when you shared, do you see the share screen phenomenon, or are you only seeing the original screen?
I am not, I'm not seeing it at all.
Bob, you may be able to zoom it at your end. I can.
you. I can zoom it.
Yeah, just pinch it out. On mine, I can just pinch it out on the software I have.
I mean, I guess I could do that, but that only solves the problem for me.
Did everyone get a copy of it themselves? Is there somebody else
emailed
who
around.
was, yes, it was emailed around. Is there somebody else who would be more adept at manipulating this than I am? I have to say, I usually depend on the youngest person in my office, or in the case of Paul Spurn, you
The
know,
oldest person on the committee.
the oldest person on the committee.
Lynn, I don't think I got the final edition of this.
Yes,
Uh,
I sent it
was
to
it in
you and
an
everybody.
email? You
Yep.
did. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I'll look for it in the meantime. Okay.
So
Is there
can-
another committee member who might be able to put it up while Paul's looking?
I'm working on this right now.
Good.
Oh, that's
But
brilliant of you.
as,
Gotta think of
as Dan said, if you just go to your own screen, you can just, pinch it and it gets bigger.
I
which
know,
works
it's
for-
funny because I'm not seeing that at all. I don't even see it
It
on
work-
my, oh, wait.
Yeah, see, Dan is right. I could do it. Everybody else can probably do it. Just do that little pinch
only if
thing.
you have a touch screen.
I don't have a
Oh.
touch screen.
Oh, I can't.
Oh.
do it.
No, I'm in an architect's office on screens that deal with with CAD. That's kind of where I am.
for the non-touchscreen people, you gotta go to the browser menu and make it increase the resolution from, it's probably at like 100%, make it 120 or 150 or something.
Hey Bob, it's Michelle.
Yeah.
Could Lynn select the control key on her keyboard and the scroll on her mouse and see if that changes the view options?
Good. If that's the hotkey combination, that would be
Well,
awesome.
I'm pushing control, Michelle. You
Select
always have the,
control and then at the same time, the scroll on your mouse that might go up, be in the center of the mouse goes up and down. That might
yeah,
allow
no,
you to change the zoom.
nope, it's not doing it.
Or try Control and the plus key. That didn't work either.
I'm according to my screen, I've enlarged it to 200%, but you are not seeing that.
No, it didn't change.
I don't think we have the power. It's not enabled.
Actually, you do. So if Lynn's already done it on hers, then for other users, you can do the same thing. You hit control and then the scroll on your mouse to change the view option. Also in the top right, depending on how your view is set, you might have something that says view options that's either fit to window, original.
Well, Michelle, you're a genius. That worked.
That worked? Okay,
Yes.
good.
Okay, well, it's not working on mine, but I have another screen with it on my Word document. So if you all can follow it on your screens, I will take you through the articles.
All
I don't
right.
want to keep you too much longer. The first one that we're looking at, and we actually are presenting these in the order that they were received. So there's just no kind of sense of, an order by priority. These is as they were received. So the first one is for the Flash Road Recreation Master Plan. And in this case, and this was from the town of Nahant, it would be under the open space and recreation category. We are recommending a grant of $44,000 from fiscal year 2025 for this project, along with the reallocation of $11,000 from fiscal year 23, which had been approved by the town meeting for the purpose of designing improvements to the Heritage Trail path as it moves through the Flash Road Recreation Area. Flash Road Recreation Area is large. It includes recently the refurbished tennis courts that were funded by community preservation, a child's playground area, soccer field, ballpark, and the Little League field. It's an extensive piece of property, and it is heavily used by children and adults. It's probably the most significant of the recreational resources that we do have in town, other than the beaches and the open space. It's actually 17 acres. And this is rather a long supporting statement because we wanted to convey what I just said in a few words, that this is a recreation resource with a lot of different dimensions to it. It has in the past been the subject of some planning, but it was a planning project that I don't think really came to fruition in really deeply analyzing the various parts of this site. This proposal would actually be a deep dive and be looking at how we make improvements and how we actually avoid conflicts with some of the adjoining properties, notably the DPW yard, as well as in that facility, the fire station and the Johnson School. So any comments about this one?
I do have a question. So this is a Flash Road Recreation Master Plan. Does the town have or plan to have a recreation master plan in its entirety?
Well, it's interesting that you asked this, Peter, because this was what was funded, that was funded several years ago. I think it was in 2016. So it did look at other aspects of the town, but in this particular case, it's really focused on Flash Road.
Are we required by any kind of, I don't know, municipal ruling or need to actually have a recreation master plan for the town?
I would say that the open space and recreation plan, master plan, is the overarching master plan, and that
Okay.
was presented by that committee and approved by the town a couple of years ago. So
Okay.
consider this a subset, if you will, a deeper dive into some of the recommendations that came out of that plan. This, by the way, this application was put forward by the town administrator and in cooperation with the Open Space and Recreation Committee.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, I'll go on to the next article.
So actually, I'll have a brief question.
Sure.
In doing this master plan, is the intention to also consider other activities that aren't currently there? Or is it just about how to better sort out the ones that are?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's both sorting out the ones that are there, but I think we have, as we saw a year ago, we have considered other things. And for instance, there was an article last year approved for modifying the tennis courts for pickleball. So there may be further ideas that come forward. I think Tony, with the consultant that he's spoken with, is thinking about a community engagement process. So there will be opportunities for comment and suggestions from through basically community meetings. Tim, I will tell you that my own fervent desire for a dressage rink is probably not going to be part of this.
Well, I was thinking maybe electric vehicle racing grounds.
Oh, okay, fine. Got it.
Solar powered electric vehicle racing.
Oh, we've
Yeah.
let in
Lynn,
all
this-
kinds.
Yeah.
Hey, Lynn, this is Tony, and you answered that perfectly. through a community public process, it'll focus on, the organization of what we currently have and open the door to additional opportunities depending on what comes in through the public process.
Okay. Further comments and questions? These have been good ones.
I'm not sure this is a question, but we've already spent $170,000 on improvements, and now we're going to do the master plan.
So you know what? I tell you, you just actually just pushed my button on this one, Bob, because it was more than $170,000. The tennis courts were a very substantial investment. Part of the reason why we pushed for the master plan a few years ago was to deal with exactly this issue. We looked at what it meant to relocate the tennis courts and concluded that where they are now was the place that was quite honestly the best, the least of the worst in terms of where it could be moved. I say this because the tennis courts are in very close proximity to wetlands. They're right there in the wetland zone. So yes, we are spending money. And in fact, in a few minutes, you're going to hear about another recommendation for improvements in this recreation area. In the best of all possible worlds, you'd have this master plan and then you would do various projects. We're not in the best of all possible worlds. We're in the world we're in.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pangloss.
Thank you. If we could bring in Candide next, I would. Okay.
But
what else?
there sort of is an assumption, though, that the result of the master plan will not be to abandon or compromise the work that's already been done.
There is that assumption. I think a lot of this master plan will be looking at reducing conflicts with the neighboring properties and improving safety, probably improving drainage. Okay, because the other thing I didn't mention, of course, is the golf course, which is right there. So there's some real planning issues to solve here.
Yeah, there's two key factors that really pushed us in this direction. One, there was the approved $11,000 to improve the heritage trail that goes through this area of town, from the Flash Road crosswalk that goes through the heritage trail behind the dump to the school. And the other large factor in that is the old Babe Ruth field that sits behind the fire station. It no longer has an infield. It hasn't been used as a baseball field in I don't know how many years. And we've actually had to remove the dugouts because they were a safety issue. They had just eroded to such a scenario. We had to get rid of them. And so at the same time, soccer actually is pretty active, and they use the outfield, which is immediately adjacent to the golf course. So part of the thought process was we'd like to move the soccer field away from the golf course for safety reasons. And then how would that impact the path of the heritage trail going through this area? That was kind of the two items that initiated this conversation. And then there are a number of other things, like Lynn said, related to safety, especially around the public works yard. And so it would not, as you mentioned, Bob, we're trying to approach this as a realistic master plan, not a complete blank slate, endless amount of funds type approach. More like how do we work within what we have, what we've already invested in, and work around those items. And if there are other things that people want to bring into the area, how could they fit in with the existing area that hasn't really been invested in yet?
Thank you, Tony. Other questions or comments about this article? Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned one thing. The dollar amount for this was based on research that Tony did with engineering and design firm that has the capability of undertaking such a master plan. That's tie and bond with the landscape arm of Halverson Design. So was based on a pretty thoughtful approach and an understanding of the site and the scope and opportunities here.
I'm sorry, Lynn, could you repeat that figure?
The figure?
The XXXXX that I have on my master plan on my article draft.
Oh
don't have-
gosh, you should have the article itself. I sent it out 2 days ago with all the numbers.
You've got an old one there, Deb.
Okay, oh, I thought I sent it to you. I thought I got, okay. If I did-
Anyway, the sum is $44,000, Deborah,
Okay.
which is then matched by but has reallocated $11,000 going into it, resulting in an overall cost of $50,000.
Okay, I think you did send me that. I did get that a couple of days ago, but I printed the wrong one or something. Sorry.
It's all right. So shall we go on?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right. So why don't you scroll down to Heritage Trail? This was our second application. We are recommending a sum of $20,000 from fiscal year 2025 to clearly delineate and make improvements to the Heritage Trail in the Goddard Drive area. This is the property, the Heritage. Well, first of all, I should ask for a show of hands. How many on this committee have actually walked the entire Heritage Trail? Oh, good. I see Joe Doherty has done it. You may remember, Joe, that when you wend your way past the community gardens and you follow a track through a little sort of little natural wetlands areas, you come to a set of stairs that the railings kind of sloping and falling down, and you get up to an area that you're actually, when there were houses there, you're right in the middle of the Coast Guard housing area, going out onto Goddard Drive, and you kind of walk across there and think, am I trespassing? Is this somebody's property? And then you get up towards, the Bailey's Hill Fort Ruckman Passage, and you're on the right track. This section, of course, is all part of the Coast Guard housing redevelopment plan. And this proposal would actually clearly delineate a 10-foot wide passage spot. So the Heritage Trail remains intact. The property owners who, may be, developing housing on either side of it, no, it's not their property. This is the town of Nahant. And so it provides for that, that sort of passage through there, defined by a split rail fence, which has become the kind of, if you will, the pattern language for fencing by DPW, and there'll be signage and perhaps some plantings. Now, we had discussion about, and Tony put forward, some of this work could be done by the DPW, but if you think about the demands on the DPW, we didn't want to assume it. So we have carried what was put forward by the town as their ideal budget. It may be that the entire sum isn't used, and in that case, it sort of goes back into the general reserve for CPA.
Lynn, this would be actual construction, shoveled fences, not planning or design.
That's right, Dan. This is doing the work.
And Lynn, what is the surfacing? What does that involve?
Oh, it's just, it will be the ground. It's not going to be, yes, it's not going to be a hardscape or anything like that. They'll be going across whatever vegetation there is.
It'll probably be like a crushed stone or stone dust.
Well,
type
I
surface.
think, yeah, I think we hadn't really got there, Tony, but yeah, you
Right.
might want to do that.
Yeah.
Just as a comment, only because I was on the committee that basically designated this 10-foot wide path. What we envisioned was not a split rail fence. We wanted to keep it more natural. We thought of some shrubs. So I don't know if that can be reconsidered in this. I think it would be better for the environment instead of a split rail fence. And eventually, if the shrubs grew tall enough, they would give privacy to the people who own property on either side. So just a comment. I mean, obviously, there's already a plan in place, but I think, I think shrubs would granted shrubs take, somebody has to take care of them. But to me, it's more environmentally friendly than a split rail fence.
Peter, I had the exact same idea myself.
We have that. Yeah, so did we. We have, except for both. So we do have plantings included in the cost estimate. Our thought was split rail fence on the property line with about a foot shoulder inside the fence, available for a foot or two shoulder inside the fence, available for plantings. And then you'd end up having like a 6-foot wide path for walking.
Okay.
Well,
Technically,
Our concern is really making sure that really delineating the path and making sure that there's no encroachment in the future.
technically, this is beyond that, but I was wondering, is there any plan for this to get connected to Willow Road? Or, I mean, I actually walk that area a lot. Whenever I want to try and cut across, it's like going across the golf course.
that is what it is.
So there's no plan to try and have a walking path to connect it, other than around Bailey's Hill.
Not to my knowledge, Tim.
Okay.
I've always wondered what the rules are for walking the golf course, because I walk across it too. Watch out for golfers.
Just listen for 4.
Be careful.
Be careful. I know. I'm adding to, thank you for the comments. I just added plantings to the supporting statement because I see it wasn't specifically included. And I appreciate what Peter offered in terms of a natural situation. A lot of the community preservation has repeatedly gotten grant requests from the town of Nahant to clarify the rights of way. And I do think that partly what Tony is responding to is a long history of the complications of maintaining clear rights of way. So I appreciate the comments. If there's nothing further, I'll move on.
To back up a second, Bob, as we look at these various CPC items, do we want to vote up or down on each one individually? Do we want to look? I think last year, didn't we vote them up or down individually?
Yes,
Oh, good
but
point.
that's not tonight.
Oh, that's not tonight. Okay, so tonight's just review go through the whole litany. And
Yeah, tonight's, questioning, understanding, then you get a chance to process it, and then we'll vote it.
great.
I think beginning next week.
Don't take too long because I'm on a straight course for that town warrant.
Understood.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that our vote changes your recommendation or your articles.
I believe that's true. I think we have some autonomy here, but we always love it when FinCom
Yes.
endorses our work.
Yes, I was going to say, I mean, it's certainly the optics are better if we're aligned. So
Right.
enough
So-
on Heritage Trail.
Any more on Heritage Trail?
Nope.
All right, well, let's go on to the next one, which goes back to the Flash Road Recreation Area and to the Little League field, where we received an application from the town of Nahant and Nahant Little League for an application to install lighting for the Little League field. The request from being recommended by Community Preservation is $75,000. This is part of what is anticipated to be a $120,000 project to install 4 light standards that are capable of illuminating that field for nighttime playing. The additional funding is coming from the Little League organization, along with in-kind services provided by Dave Elmer, who is working very closely with the Little League organization and is a big advocate and was very active in preparing this grant application. It's a major investment, and it's something that we took some time with. Tony was able to give us information about, along with Dave, about how these improvements could not only extend the season and the daytime capability or nighttime capability for the Little League, which is part of an active Little League program with the town of Swampscott, but would also enable the field to be rented. And apparently there has been a private organization that has rented the Little League field in the past for their activities. I think it's, Tony, are you still there?
Yes.
No, I can't remember. Is it called Swing something?
Yeah, in the last 2 years, we've rented the property out to Swing Factory, which is
Swing Factory.
Yeah, a local club that essentially what we typically charge there to the Nahant Little League is $500 for the season. We were able to bring Swing Factory in actually through the Little League. They had connected us, and I think they rented the space for 4 times, and we charged them $1,000, and they didn't even blink an eye at it. And so we didn't end up charging Little League anything for that year. So it actually worked out nicely. They kind of, bringing that outside use in, supplemented the local youth program.
So we talked about, how this could bring in some revenues to the town. It's not going to be anything huge, but it could be something that would help fund the recreation program maintained by the town of Nahant.
So these businesses that do sports training on their own, like the swing, I have 6 clients that do this type of work. They're so busy, and you're right, $1,000 for them it's a piece of cake for them to drop it to do this kind of training, and they're always looking for places.
So one of the things we learned about this particular field, Joy, is that it's well drained. So
that's good.
some of the issues that we've got in other portions of the Flash Road areas are not so much here. And in fact, through the Little League and community preservation over the last couple of years, investments have been made in fencing and stands and backstops and all kinds of things. So it's really has been turning into a pretty nice ball field. And if it enables additional rentals, and those can be done in a way that doesn't conflict with Nahant's Little League program or with other sort of users in that area, I think it's going. I had enthusiasm from the town administrator as well as Dave Elmer about that prospect.
Then I have a question on I guess you'd say the aesthetics of the. First of all, I know these poles from what I've seen are very high. you give me how many feet, it won't mean anything to me, but I guess what I really wanted to say is, will they be aimed in such a way as not to disturb the abutting neighbors? And will they be a kind of light that is not, that doesn't get disseminated, that's not too, obnoxious?
Yeah, I think you've brought up two important points. We don't have so close immediate neighbors, but we certainly do have neighbors. And we really think about dark sky thinking. So the lights should be and they will be tall standards. I don't think you may be thinking about what happens over at the country club, which is a very large light with a lot of light. That's not what we'd be talking about here. And I think one of the things that we would do is to consult with a firm like Ty and Bond, who is experienced with this kind of design. If they're working on the Flash Road master plan, they'd be a good company to talk with about, appropriate fixtures. But they certainly should meet today's dark sky requirements.
Lynn, if I can add to that and answer the question, yes, the intent would be LED high efficiency lighting that's direct lighting. So it would be aimed down. There would be remote controlled by the town, timing controls established, and today's technology comes with a usage tracking, so we can actually there won't be any additional electricity cost to the town. Whoever's using the field will be charged for their electricity usage, and then all that can be tracked.
Tony, you mentioned the timing of that. I was wondering, is there going to be a hard shutdown time of 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, midnight, 3 a.m., whatever? And also, I'd love to see if there was some sort of a supporting statement from the closest abutters, which is probably Flash Road.
Yeah, so right now I think we have a hard stop at 8:30 on the lights that are at the basketball court on Flash Road. So I would imagine we'd follow that same, track. And based on the schedule that the Little League presented, they'd be done by that time. And there was lighting there before, so it hasn't been used in many years because it's gone out of service. But lighting in this area was used in the past. There are existing poles that we're actually going to have to remove and replace.
Lynn, is there any data of capacity and demand? We have a fixed amount of Little League age kids in town, and we have some demand. Are they not able to get fields during the daylight hours during the baseball season? That this is a valuable incremental hours. Basically, that's what we're getting. We're getting incremental hours of field availability. Is there a demand? Do we know that?
We have been advised of that by the Little League itself. So I can't give you statistical data. I can simply say that Dave Elmer and his group were quite clear in saying that they had demand. And this would actually improve their ability to serve kids. By the way, this is not only, this is Little Leaguers, but it's also the T-ballers.
Yeah, and I recall a conversation or conversations that I've heard others having with relationship to the usage of the fields and the need. And even I recollect, although my son is now 31, so going back to his Little League days was quite a while ago. But I do recall, like at the beginning of the season, early spring, it's difficult where they're squeezing games in. Obviously, as we get into the summer hours, it's less of an issue because we have we have natural light. But I do remember that being an issue, and the need for it. I think there is a need for it, and the beauty is we're not only helping our kids, but where there's a possibility we can make some income from this.
There is data, Dan, and Lynn, I remember sending you an email with a lot of that info when we were going through similar questions during the review process at the CPC. So there is data we can pull up from my off the top of my head. In the shoulder season, lighting would add the ability for 2 extra games. In the summer, in the middle of the summer, really the lighting is only helping you to add an extra game, and the lighting portion is it's only kicking on for half of that game, the later half. But
Right.
there is some data there, and
Yeah, there's data, but there's not demand data. You can say
No.
there's more opportunities, but I don't have the
Right.
demand data.
Right.
I thought that Dave actually did give us a sense of how many kids were coming along in the different programs.
He did. He gave us numbers, but he didn't give us the demand. He didn't give me.
Correct.
Yeah. Here's a number of games we're not getting because we don't have the fields. I can ask him
Exactly.
for
And
that. I can ask him for
I
that.
don't think he was very detailed. He also mentioned that we could then have teams, not just with Swampscott, but from Lynn as well.
Yeah.
So this really did increase opportunities.
It is a big thing
In-
about youth sports in general, and I think creating not only the opportunities, but the training and the idea of cooperation and teamwork
Yes.
across lots of different folks. Any further questions on this one?
A similar observation to before is now we're spending more on Flash Road
Mhm.
in absence of a master plan.
That's right, Bob. That is exactly right. Not the kind of usual process you would like, but the fact that we had lights here before, that they were functioning, and extending the season sort of made us think that, it's not an impossible idea. It's a little bit like the tennis court situation. There was a tennis court. We looked at what it meant to think about moving it. We're not thinking about moving this ball field. We've already invested in, equipment and backstops and so on. This is one more improvement. But it's certainly this year more than any other year well, I should say, other than the tennis court year, this is a series of recommendations about recreation activities.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to lighting. It starts to beg the question of why do we need a master plan if we have all these concrete plans
Well,
without.
because there's more things than the improvements to the amenities themselves. There is the neighboring issue. There's I'll say the edges with DPW, the golf course, Johnson School, neighbors, community garden. Those are all edges that we really need to think about and figure out.
So aside from, I guess, the question of Little League, and we just went over the Heritage Trail and the Flash Road planning earlier, and Bob, I don't know if I'm stepping out here, but can our committee ask your committee or maybe even the town administrator to literally try to put together a master plan for all of this stuff so that I mean, I'm not opposed to lighting the field. I'm not opposed to, I know there's a need for defining the Heritage Trail, especially through that area, but it just seems where, I guess, to my first question on the first sub article, it just seems like we're doing little master plans here and there and can we just get one master plan that looks at recreation throughout the town of Nahant so that we can, I guess, fully understand all of these little components as they come to us. And again, it's not targeted at these particular items. It's just targeted. Let's try and come up with a mainstream plan for the entire town so that when you come to us with, say, this little league lighting, then hey, this is part of our master plan. This was, step number 4 or whatever. I'm just, speaking out loud, thinking out loud.
I agree with
I think
Peter
that
on costs on any of these moves. We don't want the master plan to tell us we put the heritage trail in the wrong place or that the light on a different ball field.
it's not. So I think that is what we're trying to do. It sounds like there might be some confusion about the approach here. The section of Heritage Trail that we're funding, that we're asking for grant funding for construction dollars, is up on Goddard Drive. The money that we're asking for lighting is for the existing field. The master plan is for everything in between. The master plan isn't going, this master plan, like I said before, I really don't want to take it, I don't want to do a master plan that is a blank check approach, give me every single wish in the world. It's more of a realistic approach of, we have a little league field here, we're invested in it. We have a basketball court and tennis court here, we're invested in it. The playground is where it is, we're invested in that. It's these spaces in between and the heritage trail that connects within that, and the public buildings that are right there, is how do we want to organize that the best way possible, and then use that plan to come to the CPC in the future for dollars for actual construction. So I think we're saying the same thing, or I hope we are anyways.
I guess I would refer you to the Open Space and Recreation Master Plan. I do think it makes sense to take a look at that, because I think your comments about we should look at the whole overall picture is important. And I would also say that, I've brought up more than once in our committee reviews the 2016 Recreation Master Plan that did look at not only the Flash Road areas, but other recreation opportunities in the town, playing grounds and so on. So there are documents out there.
And these activities are following along with those plans. They track with those master plans.
They do.
I think it's worth keeping in mind that more than a third of this 17-acre site is really unspecified.
Yeah.
And it's the central portion at one edge of which is the defunct Babe Ruth field. And there are some soccer goals piled up at the other end. I presume they're intermittently used. So we've got a large open space there, and we need to decide, or we can decide with a plan like this, how we're going to use it, whether it's going to be multi-use or dedicated use. It's a great opportunity. I was out there last week before we voted on this, just to have a look. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place. Starting with the basketball and tennis courts that kind of got developed where they were, rather than take maybe the planning approach, which would be to look at the whole site and decide where to go. No, we put them where they were, and they are gorgeous and well drained. Hopefully that's a permanent thing, and well used. And I think it's a good idea to look at the rest of this site and see how we can best use that.
Yeah, I think when when you're doing your descriptions, if Lynn, what you say is that some of these items are listed out in that master plan, then that
Mhm.
should be included in this only to give the voter the knowledge that we're just not doing this willy-nilly. And I think that was kind of my point at the beginning.
Well,
Again,
Pete-
I'm not opposed to any of this. I just want to make sure that we're doing some sort of planning instead of just nipping here and there. And then to Dan's point, we come out and we find out, hey, and it's probably a bad example because we we do need the lights at the Little League field, but maybe the master plan says no, you should be putting lights at the park at the library. I'm using an example, but I just feel that if we're using the open space and a master plan, then we should be referring to it to give better sense that we're in alignment. Thank you.
Pete, I've just written the sentence. Thanks. You just gave it to me.
I think that the confusion comes from the master plan article. And if that were clarified, that it's not a blank slate master plan, but instead we've already committed to X, Y, and Z. And this plan is to better integrate those existing and committed things. I think this confusion would go away.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
It's very targeted.
Mhm.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and honestly, that was what you're saying is kind of like when the Heritage Trail money got approved last year. That was kind of what launched us into this discussion because it was, we're gonna build a heritage trail before we know like the best way to lay out this space where the Babe Ruth field could go away and we could move the soccer field to improve safety. So that's kind of what launched us into this thought process of maybe we should look at this space that's in between the already invested properties and the bigger picture before we go and lay out a heritage trail. So that's good feedback. I agree with them. If it's sparking confusion, then adding that extra information will help prevent that for town meeting.
Thank you. So I'm just making notes on the supporting statements in terms of how we need to revise. And we'll be revising these with this feedback and getting them back out to you for the session that will follow this. So with that feedback, shall I move on to Article 4?
Yes.
And this is the Housing Development Location Study. You are all aware that we have a housing production plan that is inching to its conclusion. Michelle Capano has been the actually just brilliant chairman of this committee. I know it's still in front of the board. It still needs the Board of Selectmen and the planning board's final endorsement. But this particular application is to fund a total of a $60,000 study to actually specifically look at basically design standards and the number of units that can be built on specific sites of town-owned property. So I'm looking at the text a little bit. I think we do need to develop this one much further, but that's what this is about. So of this, 43,000 of the $60,000 in total, 43,556 is coming from this year's appropriation. We're matching from the housing reserve with $16,444 to come up with a $60,000 projected request. So,
Lynn, I have a question. This is your line of business. So is 60 grand kind of the going rate for all of this?
Honestly, Deborah, this is not my line of business.
No?
I I don't do housing.
Okay, right.
But
Lynn, do you
but
want me to
but I
answer
will
that?
say this. I know the firm that was contacted to get information about what would be an appropriate budget, which was Davis Square Architects. It's a firm I've seen a lot of their work. And I think it is, it was based on consultation with that firm. So Michelle, you certainly can jump in here.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was gonna mention. So Tony had previously reached out to a couple of firms to get some high level estimates on this type of work and what we wanted to do for proposed, say, development of 20 or 25 units. And we didn't want to get too site specific. We want to, until the plan's finalized, get further direction. But what we're trying to do is line up the funding once the plan is approved and we can speak to the board. They'll own the plan and make the final direction back to the housing committee. And we'd like to be able to support that. Design guidelines are important because they will give direction to a potential developer on what the specifications are. And we want to make sure that whatever designs are developed, they fit within the location and the neighborhood in our community. So we're really hoping that you'll consider this and it moves us forward more in addressing the housing needs in town.
So Lynn just said something that contradicts with something in the verbiage on the supporting statement. And I could have misheard what she said, but it sounded like we were hiring a firm to look at town-owned land for possible development and design plans or whatever. But this specifically says town-owned land or private property. So just trying to get a clarification.
There's going to be a
We don't
single,
know.
mostly, we don't know which side it's going to be.
Correct. That direction will
So-
come from the Board of Selectmen.
But that's not part of this study?
This is kind of putting the cart before the horse, is it not?
No, it's not. I don't look at it that way. We're in the process of the plan's going to be finalized and published next week. And then by the end, my objective is by the end of April, the plan will be approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, and then we'll move forward to the state. Afterwards, the Board of Selectmen own the plan. They will set the direction of which properties will require the further study, whether it's town-owned or privately owned, and that will help the Housing Committee work with the Board of Selectmen further for the design guidelines. Clearly, these design guidelines are agnostic. It doesn't matter whether the property is town-owned or privately owned. We need to have a set of plans that we can work with, that we can share with developers to give them guidance on what we're looking to build.
But if you
But does
But if you don't even know what
can I
the
jump in?
property is that you're going to be using, that's like designing a
Peter,
building,
let me jump in.
don't have
Let me
property,
jump
you
in.
don't even know where it's going. Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't matter where the location is at this time.
it
Well,
does,
the
it does
the
matter.
location,
It does matter. If you have an
No, it doesn't.
L-shaped
People
building
buy,
that goes,
no, Peter, if you think about it, people, they do designs for home developments agnostic of what their location is going to be. And there are plenty of plans out there for new homes, and they don't know where the homes are going to go. They don't know the types of properties yet. And these are some things that, very large, builders do across the country. So,
Michelle,
go
can I
ahead,
step
Tony.
in for a second? It says private property in there because we don't know if a private property owner would approach the town. Should this money get approved, we don't know if a private property owner would approach the town and say, hey, I'm thinking about redeveloping my property. So we put it in there to include that possibility. But it's been very clearly stated by the selectmen and in the draft plan that the selectmen and the town are not going to be pursuing private property to develop. There are private properties in Nahant that could be suitable as opportunity sites. And if they were to redevelop, we want to be part of that conversation because we feel that the town would rather have control, have some element of control in that, but we are not pushing for private property to redevelop. We have it in there as a catch-all. It's most likely that this money would be used to explore the feasibility of public property that is identified as opportunity sites in the housing production plan. And when I spoke with Davis Square, you know, one of the things that they, in order to provide a quote, they wanted to understand what the limitations of any potential property might be. And really that threshold started at around 25 units,
Right.
either less or higher. And I explained to them, we would be looking at 25 units at the max. It would be probably much less, probably less than that. So if that's the threshold, give us an estimate for a property. If you were going to look at a property to potentially build up to 25 units, and most likely it's going to be a public property that's identified as an opportunity site in the plan. I just want to make that very clear. It says private property there because someone might approach us, but we are not by any means, you know, approaching private properties and pushing them to, you know, get involved. We just want to put it on there in case, you know, somebody were to jump into this situation, you know, want to get involved in this situation.
Michelle, may I ask a question?
Sure.
When you say design guidelines, I'm trying to visualize more specifically an example. Does that mean things like number of stories,
Yes.
height,
Yes.
courtyards,
Yes.
duplexes,
Yes.
townhouses, that
Yes.
kind of thing?
Yes.
Materials, landscaping,
Materials.
all of that, all of that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Massive.
Again, how
I
do
don't
you,
know.
Well,
ahead.
Pete, let's just think about it. Nahant is an entirely residential town. You know, you think about context and neighborhood. So you know, in terms of scale throughout the town, there's very few areas where the scale of properties would exceed, you know, 10,000 square feet. In fact, the ideal would probably be, you know, 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. You know, there's the density and the character of this town is very readable. And it's
Yeah.
going to be readable most likely with the opportunity sites, which have already been laid out in the housing production plan.
But one, the plan hasn't come out yet, hasn't been approved by the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board. We're looking at coming up with design criteria and ideas for property that we don't even know what we're going to use. So you just said 10,000 square feet. Okay, what about property at Greystone Road, which is a lot larger than that? That's a totally different design. Are we going to be designing 5 different types of units? I mean, I'm having a hard time grasping.
So, Peter, I think what you're
doing the
asking, that kind of specification would come out once we put an RFI together and go towards an RFP with a group of consultants to help us determine, you know, of the locations that Board of Selectmen have selected, you know, how much can we get out of the budget that we have to get the best use of these design guidelines? We need to have them to be able to use with developers. Otherwise, you know, we're basically kicking the can around housing down the road, and it's been a long time. And so it would be really good if we can just line up some of these things in advance. Worst case scenario, if the plan doesn't get approved by the end of April, we can pull the article. I'm okay with that. And I'll work with Tony on what the next steps would be.
I don't think the plan is somewhat attached, but you don't need a housing production plan to explore a development opportunity in the town. Obviously, having both, you know, having a housing production plan approved and by the state, it provides for some benefits to the community. It already has the biggest benefit is initiating the conversation and getting feedback from the community. The other is that it provides you temporary safe harbor against unfriendly 40B developments if it gets approved. But you don't need it to go through to look a little bit closer. It's, you know, the challenging part about the housing production plan is there's no specifics about the opportunity sites, right? And so people are concerned about, are you talking about a 100-unit building here? Are you talking about a 10-unit building? How many stories? All those details are missing.
So
And
how
this
do you
is
do
what
design
that
guidelines?
study would allow you to bridge that gap.
All right. So
I just, go ahead,
ahead.
Bob.
I,
No,
I,
go ahead.
I have 4 questions. Question 1. So the housing production plan has not been approved. We are anticipating approval shortly. Do the proposed changes to the housing production plan include any statements or projections about the financial component?
No,
No.
no, it's
How
not
can it,
required of the plan.
I understand that, but how can we embark on a program of this magnitude without at least the beginnings or at least statements of what the financial objectives or potential liabilities are? Anyway,
Because
okay,
there
so
isn't
that answered
specific-
that was my first question. Okay.
To answer that, it's because there aren't specifics related to the opportunity sites. It's a larger, high level, the master plan. This study would allow you to explore those financial impacts on a specific basis.
Yeah, but I think we need to understand, are we attempting to go into this and be revenue neutral to the town, or will this cost the town money? And if so, you know, in what very large range are we talking?
I mean, look at examples across the state or even locally of housing developments. Now, and it depends which type of housing development you're talking about. Sounds like you're talking about affordable housing, subsidized housing, and there is obviously going to be some investment from the community.
Yes, that's my point.
Right.
I can't tell you what that's going to be until we have some design guidelines that give us appropriate sizing on how many units and, you know, all of the criteria and the elements.
Also, you can't go into this saying, you know, we got to build what we got to build, and it's going to cost what it's going to cost.
No, we're not saying that, but
That's not what
we're
it is.
saying that we need to have some guidelines to work from, so that can give us the basis of what we're trying to accomplish.
I think
think
it's more
guidelines-
like you look at, if you're looking at Greystone Road, for instance, as an example, you're bringing in a housing firm, an architectural firm that can look at Greystone and say, with feedback from the community, okay, this is what you can build in this area. This is this is what the investment would take. This is what the cost impact would be. These are the different, you know, specific factors. That's what the study, to me, you know, it kind of gets to the answers that I think the FinCom has been asking for, that the current housing production plan doesn't have. It's impossible to provide those answers because it's at such a high level.
I guess the problem that I have is from the beginning, I didn't like the way that the selection process for the pieces of property went in the first place. I thought it was not a thorough investigation in my mind. So I'm not comfortable with all of a sudden wanting to do the same thing with design criteria when Lynn just mentioned a 10,000 square foot lot. Greystone Road is a lot bigger than 10,000
No,
square
no,
feet.
Pete,
And
that wasn't what I was mentioning at
I'm-
all.
But your comparisons are 10,000 square feet and other things that are around town. And I'm uncomfortable with taking public money and spending it before we have an approved plan and approved sites that make sense.
So, okay.
That's just,
Yeah, and Peter, I'm going to give the floor back to you. So that was my question 1.
no, I'm good. I'm good.
My question 2 is, are we going to bid this?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I'll get
Now,
bid.
question 3, have we selected the strategy that we're going to pursue to get ourselves into the safe harbor?
Well, the production housing plan is one of the first steps towards safe harbor by getting an approved plan from the state.
Yes,
The
understood.
second, another step is showing progress. Progress can be the design guidelines to lead us to a development. It could be doing an activity where we bring developers in and take them around town and show them opportunity sites and ask them, would they be interested in working with the town on town-owned land?
Yep.
There could be an open.
Okay, so let me be really specific. So as I understand it, there are 2 approaches. One is a number of units approach,
Mhm.
and the second is a land area approach. Have we
Yes.
have we selected which of those 2 we are pursuing? Because the execution of that depends very much on the strategy that you're deciding to pursue.
So we're short on the land area. So we have to do a development to get us.
We're short on both.
Let me finish. We're short on land in order to hit the GLAM analysis. We would need to do a development to get us to that next benchmark.
Mhm.
Then we could apply to the state for the GLAM and see if they'll approve it. I'm not aware of any community that's been approved for the GLAM.
Has any
However,
applied for it?
I don't know that. I just know that I have not been able to find any communities approved for it. So the component is, though, on paper, the town looks very good given the properties that we currently have. We're short, though. So we have to do a development regardless. If we do one development, say, for example, Greystone Road,
Right.
and it gets us to the GLAM, we've achieved safe harbor, and we could effectively be done with 40B if that's what people's concerns are. However, it doesn't address the affordable housing needs in the town. And there's still opportunities to do some other types of affordable housing that meet the middle income of folks that want to downsize from larger homes to something smaller. It doesn't address the needs of seniors that live in this town who are either struggling in the size of houses that they're living in and they want to downsize. So that's the piece that we're still not accomplishing as part of the plan.
Okay, so let me ask the question again. Have we selected the strategy that gets us to the 40B safe harbor?
No, because the board of selectmen haven't reviewed and approved the final plan yet.
And you don't necessarily have to select one. They both.
No, you don't, but if you're going to start spending time, effort, and money, you want to focus your efforts to achieve your objective, but we don't know necessarily what the objective is.
Yeah,
The
but Bob,
objective, wait a minute.
doesn't that, excuse me,
No.
Bob, doesn't this proposal achieve exactly what you're pointing toward? And that is, it's giving the town resources to provide real model plans for whatever strategy we decide to take to achieve safe harbor and to get affordable housing. I think that's all it is. And that's why it specifies, since there are restrictions on using CPC funds only for the public good, to say that it can be used either for development of private land or public land because this meets a public need.
Yeah.
And that's really all we're doing. We're just giving them the funds
So
to
Paul,
make those model plans.
so Paul, you're perfect. Thank you. My question 4 was, so what specifically are the deliverables here? I heard the phrase explore feasibility. I heard design guidelines. I heard specific locations, and now, Paul seems to add, rightly so, some
So the
guidance as to which strategy we're pursuing. So what are the deliverables?
So for this housing development location study, the main deliverable is the design guidelines for a location that we can develop for affordable housing.
Design guidelines
But we don't have a location.
without a location.
That's okay. That's okay. We're still,
That can
until the
change.
housing plan's approved and the Board of Selectmen provide direction, which location or locations, right? You know, we can potentially have an opportunity to work with an architect firm to say, okay, if it's not gray zone load, maybe we can, work through this project. They don't just do one location, they do 2 locations, right?
Mhm.
It really comes down to putting the RFI together and seeing how much we can get out of an architect firm that can do these design guidelines.
I mean, test bores alone on one property going to run us $40,000. They can't come up with anything close to a price without test bores.
We're not going to need test scores.
Yeah.
I'd
That's
like
for a developer to take on. That's not for this.
so back to Bob's point, the price is totally unknown unless we know what the site specific criteria are. The price.
No, this is what we're looking to spend. What is this?
$60,000.
$60,000.
Right.
Now, we could get potential grants also. If we find that the cost from an RFI is higher than what we've planned for, we've worked with other, like an MAPC, other grant, agencies to say, we're looking to do design guidelines. The costs are higher than what we've budgeted for. Do you have grants that can help bridge the gap?
Why wouldn't we be doing that anyway? We should be doing that anyway.
Right. I mean, but this is the first step, right? We have CPC and we know housing is a component of it. And we're going back to what we've known before, where we started this whole process was through CPC.
Peter has talked to 40B developers at length, and I think has some insight on it. Has the housing committee talked to 40B developers that would actually do that?
They weren't 40B developers, they were developers. And yes, some of them do develop 40B, but yeah. They weren't specifically 40B.
So we're safe harbor so that we can be among the non-half of the cities and towns that are compliant with 40B. Why are we hoping to be industry leaders in this area when we don't seem to have too much exposure as we sit, because the economics and the basic marketplace of building 40B in town is just not that attractive?
Speaking
We don't know
of
what the market's going to do, Dan. The market changes every single day. Just because it hasn't happened, that's not an indication that may not happen in the future. The state could come in and say, well, Nahant has, quite a bit of open land. Maybe we'll take some of it and do our own development. They could do that too.
Or at the same time, a developer could come in and do their own unfriendly 40B right now.
There's
All right.
private
So
property
I'm
out
sorry,
there.
but I just feel that those are kind of threats. First of all, 40B's been around since 1969. In 55 years, no 40B developer has ever come into town to build something. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but please don't use that as a threat. We're just, we're
I
trying.
was simply making a
It came
statement.
across as a threat, and we've heard it before. And as far as the state coming in, I find it really, really hard to believe that the state would come into Nahant, the little town of Nahant, and grab a piece of property and build a high rise. I just find it very. I find that you're stretching.
We're seeing what's
Can we take
happening.
a pause? Can we pause for a second here? This conversation is quickly going into a general support versus opposition of affordable housing, and not about the grant application here. The idea of this grant application was to bridge the gap between the housing production plan general information and the specifics that the public has been seeking from the town. Yes, you've identified sites, but what exactly are you going to put on those sites? What's it going to look like? How many units? Who's going to live there? Who's it going to serve? That's why, and that's the feedback we got. So we said, let's explore that. Let's
That's
pull
not,
one of these.
that's not how
So
this is coming across. though.
So I have a question, a little bit different from this. As I understand, the whole point of this grant is to develop some design guidelines for sort of a typical house as part of one of these developments. Is Nahant the first town in Massachusetts to do that?
No,
Do we have similar guidelines from other towns that they will share with us?
not sure,
Actually-
but I mean, we could ask. I don't know if they will or not.
Because
Actually,
I'm trying
Tim,
to understand. Go ahead.
I would just jump in. In fact, the town did fund design guidelines for the Coast Guard housing site several years ago. In fact, that was the basis for the 2008 RFP, which resulted in 3 developers submitting proposals, one being designated. The real estate crash of 2008 sort of came in. The designated developer held on for about a year, Tim. But in fact, we have design guidelines that were prepared for that project, which we can share with you as an example of what design guidelines would be. And that was, a condition for the RFP for redevelopment.
But just to be clear on those design guidelines, those were for single family homes and a 20-unit condominium development.
That's right.
So
But that was specific to that site.
right,
That's all
that
I'm saying.
site, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But-
And that's a
But
concern
you're
that's been made.
proposing guidelines that would be able to be put in a variety of different locations. And
No,
No.
that's
So
not.
then I
So
misunderstood.
there's a couple of things here. We'd like the design guidelines to be agnostic, but depending on what the direction is of the Board of Selectmen, they may be site specific. The other component is these would be for affordable housing. So it would achieve our next milestone in terms of safe harbor for 40B. So we have to think about, work with the Board of Selectmen, which locations could be the next development, and as part of the strategy, does it move the needle on the glam, and if it, depending on that location. So we have to back into how much more acreage do we need to achieve glam, how many units help us move the needle on 40B for safe harbor, right? There's several moving parts here that the design guidelines can help us with.
May I make a comment back to what is being written about the specific example here? And I don't want to sound, I don't know how to phrase it, to say I don't want to sound too negative or concerned. I guess concerned is the right term. But to use the example of Greystone Road troubles me a bit because there's a big cell phone tower there. And that's why I don't want us to sort of be promising Greystone Road, because as people who are aware of public health issues, cell phone towers are very problematic for public health. And we're going to have to think about that in terms of the Greystone Road site. And that's unfortunate, but it's there. So I'm worried that that example for people who are aware of the cell phone tower could be problematic.
So I think that's a great example, because if the Board of Selectmen said, we'd like to look at Greystone Road, but we have a dependency with that cell phone tower, that's where the architects can come in and say, here's what you can do in terms of working with your telecom provider, either to relocate the cell phone tower or, obviously to me it's relocation, but what other areas in town could we relocate that so we could get the most use out of that site? So again, that's where I say the design guidelines can be helpful, because architects will start looking at all of those different dependencies and saying, okay, here's how we can mitigate the risk. And then, compare that with another site that may not have as many risks.
Very good to hear that mitigation and concerns, safety, public health are already being discussed. That's good to hear. And you're saying
Well,
that
I'm
that's
discussing them, and I'm sure to raise them if we receive the grant allowance and make sure we cover these with our architects.
So this conversation is very helpful because it has helped me think about how we can expand and deepen the supporting statement that was provided by one of our committee members with this article. So I appreciate the conversation.
Michelle,
And-
we have to revisit this obviously next week.
Sure.
Would it be possible to get the actual proposal to evaluate the actual deliverables?
Proposal for the study?
Yes.
We're not there yet.
So they haven't given us a proposal. How do we know what the number is then? How do we know it's $6,000?
Tony reached out to several firms to get an estimate, and these were the numbers that they provided us as a baseline to start with.
Okay, so we're not putting this money against actual frozen deliverables or an actual proposal from a qualified provider.
No, we'd do an RFI and go through the procurement process. And if there's a gap of shortfall, then we can try to, work through other grant sources to make up that difference.
Where you get bullet points?
Bullet points for the RFI.
Yeah, so when Tony got an estimate, he sort of outlined it. And so that outline, because I'm sure it's more than, what we have here.
Yeah, I do have some. It's I do have stuff from Davis Square. Site visit, site analysis, zoning review, design of potential site plan options, coordination with civil or traffic engineers if necessary, meeting with planning staff to review design options. It goes on and on. Yeah, I can provide that to you guys.
The other thing that I think needs to be part and parcel of all this discussion, another moving target. We seem to have a lot of moving targets here, and getting them into some kind of a predecessor subsequent task sequence. But we need to have to consider the possible location of a combined police and fire department public service building. And that may or may not be a go forward, but it's something that would definitely impinge on available land.
So let me ask this question. Are there any, it's kind of tough to ask. There isn't a committee that's looking at this right now, correct? There hasn't been a study. There hasn't been a study or anything done to look at creating a new,
Public safety.
public safety center.
It hasn't started yet, but there is
Okay.
funding. There is funding previously approved. We've been again, there's only so much community capital in these large public discussions, so we try not to have them all at the same time.
Right. So I guess it's up to the board of selectmen and the town administrator to determine what the priorities are. And, I support, we do need to obviously look to modernize some of our public safety assets. That goes without saying. But then we also have other challenges, regarding this affordable housing as well. And I don't know what the right answer is, frankly. So I defer back to the board of selectmen and the town administrator, set those priorities, and then we can execute.
Are we ready to move on?
That's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, I have one thing to say. I just want to say that I don't want anybody to misinterpret the concern and questioning that we do on these items. It's this committee's job to be, we are the advisory and finance committee. So when it comes to things all things with the town. When I first got on the committee, I thought it was just kind of the finance stuff, but it's all things considering. It considers everything in town, not just the finances. So our concerns and our questions are pointed in such a way that we are kind of the caregivers or overseers of what happens in the town aside from the selectmen. So just want to put that out there, that this isn't we're not trying to, cut anybody off at the knees. We're just trying to get to the best way to spend our finances and kind of the best path to get to where we need to get to.
So Peter, I appreciate that. And I look at the review and challenge that the Advisory and Finance Committee is one of the most important assets that we have around our budgetary process. If we don't have this activity that goes on, we could be overspending or underspending on areas where, we need to have the right thought behind it. So certainly well intended. I have no objection. I understand this process. It's just like anything else. We have hot topics. This is another hot topic before the town.
Yep.
And we went same here. With our responses, they're not towards any one way or the other. We went through a similar rigorous process with the CPC when this first went through their committee too. So it's a good discussion.
Are we ready to move on?
Shall we move on, please?
All right, we'll go to number 5. I'll just give you a context. We have 7 articles plus some housekeeping to go through. The next one is for the Bailey's Hill Management Plan. It's entitled that. It is actually recommending $78,515 from fiscal year 25 for the continuing reclamation of the Bailey's Hill complex, focusing on the Fort Ruckman portion of that property. So you may remember that in the recent past, we've given 2 grants towards the Bailey's Hill complex. One has actually been implemented. Well, both have been implemented to a degree. Overall, the strategy is actually to remove invasive species, to actually work to reclaim this as a natural environment with native plantings. So a test area was started on the northeast slope of the Fort Ruckman site. And then there's also been, and that was funded 2 years ago. The DPW has worked assiduously on this with a company called Partier. This has been under the aegis of the Open Space and Recreation Committee. In addition, there's been some removal of invasives on the south slope of the Bailey's Hill area, the spur out towards the northeast or out towards the east. So the supporting statement also makes mention of the fact that there'll be $3,000 donated from SWIM towards this project. This is envisioned as a multi-year effort. I think what we've heard very clearly is you don't go in once and remove invasives and think that that's over. There's a continuing sort of maintenance and reclamation effort. This would be a big dive. It's really focusing on probably the most troubled portion of this site, which is the slope facing east of the large bunker that is the basis of Fort Ruckman. And it's going to be using these forest chomper all kinds of forest chomper equipment and so on. Partier is an active partner on this along with the DPW.
Lynn, I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Is your presentation finished?
Yes, I am finished.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is, I find that this is a very ambitious plan. Is there a way to consider a smaller scale overall plan that would still maintain your bikeable and walkable paths, as we've always had, and grooming, eliminating, dead or dying trees, overgrowth, poison ivy, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But something that, where the plant maintenance is kind of an open-ended expense that may become permanent, as you say, and the general goal of making it a little bit more, I don't know, park-like. I wonder if we could let nature just sort of do everything and be more minimalist about our plans.
I do think that park-like is not what they want to achieve. What they're trying to do is to remove basically the invasives. And you've mentioned a couple of them: poison ivy, bittersweet, certain roses. I hate to say it, Norway maples, things of that nature. So this is not an intention to make this into a general park. It's actually to reclaim it as a natural area. But there's some, serious removals that's going to be necessary to get, if you will, to reset the clock, the natural clock on this. This was seen as, the Open Space and Recreation Committee has conceived of this as a 3-year project. This first year is a big bite, partly because of the nature of the equipment that would be brought in to remove these invasives. In fact, it actually was a larger amount than it is now. They initially came in with a request for $90,000, so it has been pared back. I appreciate your comment, however.
Is it realistic to get rid of all invasives and our only native plants? Is such isn't it a losing battle?
It's a good question. Again, it's going to require several years of successive management to reestablish this. I don't think the Open Space and Recreation Committee with their consultants would be proposing this if they didn't think it was possible. But, I appreciate that there's going to be a commitment over several years to make this work.
And what is the cost of the ongoing commitment and the funding source for that ongoing commitment?
Well, they envision coming back to community preservation for 2 more years. They would be lesser amounts. As I look back on my notes and the grant application, I think we'll be looking at $40,000 for the next 2 years.
You don't happen to have Trish's PowerPoint or her Excel spreadsheet that she gave for the article, for the plan?
I probably do. I could go looking.
Answer Bob's question.
Yeah, but that's what I'm quoting from.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I did look that up before I came into this session.
Okay. That was very graphically.
Yeah.
You could get your hands around it. Anyway.
So Lynn, are the native plants the majority or the minority? So I'm asking, how thin will the Bailey's Hill forest, so to speak, be? And it provides a lot of protection for some of the houses over there. So are we looking at the fact that some of those homeowners will have to consider they're going to lose some of their wind and storm protection because you've thinned out the trees so much to make this conversion to native?
I think that that's a good question. I think that it's probably less of a matter of large trees and more a matter of the smaller plantings, the shrubs and so on. But I think, nature is already actually doing some of that work. There's some of the Norway maples have had some fairly serious storm damage, as have some of the black locusts. We talked about whether it would be a wholesale remove everything or a successive approach, and they are advocating a successive approach. So it will be, a selective removal process.
Is what Melanie's talking about part of the consideration of thinking about protection from coastal storms? Is that been considered as part of the discussion?
I think that I just said, Barbara, they were talking less about large trees and more about smaller plantings, but nature is already blowing down
No, no,
some.
I understand that. I'm asking specifically what Melanie is asking, which is whether or not the importance of the vegetation there for protection of houses nearby from coastal storms, is that specific issue been part of the discussion?
I will bring that. I don't know the answer to that. I'll bring that
Because
forward.
Melanie
I happen to be a neighbor over there myself, so I'm pretty aware of the
and Melanie is over there as well. So if
Oh, I'm
she's
glad to
raising,
meet Melanie.
yeah, if she's raising
I
it,
will ask that question. I don't know the specific answer to it. I just see a lot of the breakage already.
Melanie, did I get your concern correctly? I'm not sure.
Yes, yes. And Lynn, I have another question. You said that this would be successive years. Are you putting out a bid every year? So it could be a different company coming in with a different approach each year?
No, actually the plan was generated by Open Space with Parterre, so it would be a continuous effort with Parterre.
And if I may add, this is back to what Deborah was bringing up. I remember at the CPC meeting when we discussed the plan, and Trish's plan, which Deborah referred to, is a very detailed plan.
Yes,
So
it was.
there was a
It was
lot,
an excellent
very detailed,
application.
yeah, very detailed plan. A lot of work obviously went into it. But I do recall at one point, someone asked you about the issue that Bob brought up as well. And I live across from the Audubon thicket, so I can see attempts have been made to take out non-natives. And I walk there constantly, and I can see the non-natives growing back very efficiently.
Yeah,
And so I remember
they're very vigorous. Yes.
they're vigorous. That's a nice word, vigorously. And I recall in our discussion that when someone asked about that, you said succinctly, it's a risk.
So there's going to have to be
I'm wondering
continued effort.
I'm wondering how do we value, because we have to think about budgetary risks. I'm wondering how we value the budgetary risk of regrowth.
And I'm wondering if I'm not sure who said it, but if we kind of reduce the scope or something, does that put that risk? Does that give us a higher risk? I mean, I've been to Bailey's Hill, several times and seen some of the changes. If we spend a little bit, does it put us at high? They go and remove X amount of square feet, and then the next thing you know, that when they go back again, they have to remove, a percentage of that X amount that they removed last year. So I'm wondering how much of that plays into it as well.
That's a good point. I think that what this bigger bite this year aimed at that broad section on the Fort Ruckman battery is to your point, Pete. You've got to get in and get most of it out now.
Right.
To then return next year, and you're going to be taking out more, but you're taking out the bigger bite. If you just take out, we just dealt with one slope, and you've seen that, but the whole sort of section next to it is a big, is a larger section. That first slope was, a $41,000 effort, which included creating, basically a sitting area for, viewing and so on. That's not necessarily what we're talking about in the larger area. It's really going to be, more for bird watching, hiking,
Peter,
So the-
Habitat, basically, habitat.
I was the one, Peter, who mentioned this, the downscaling, and
yeah,
what I meant was the overall goal. I mean, in fact, is it possible to get rid of invasive species? Is it something we even want? And to replace it with all native species? That's what I meant by scaling it down, just keep
Oh,
it.
I see. Yeah.
yeah. And I wonder about, like, okay, we call things invasive species. I mean, we're invasive species if you think about it. You know, we talk about coyotes. Coyotes are by definition invasive species because they started out in the middle part of the plains of the country. But my reason for saying this is, you know, we're also a prime stopping ground for birds. So birds are flying hundreds of miles. I don't know. Do they drop seeds in one way or another? And the next thing you know, we have a new plant growing here or whatever. You know, again, I like the new look of Bailey's Hill. I am concerned about, are we basically shoveling snow in a blizzard to try and eliminate the invasive species? And then the other question that I have relates to the cost. So this particular sum this year is 78,515. What do we anticipate next year? You said, I think it's a 3-year process. What do we anticipate next year and the following year?
I think I think I mentioned that was 40 and it was 50 and $40,000.
Okay, so it's a going down. Okay.
It goes down.
Yeah.
And that's confined just to this footprint.
Right.
Yeah, it's 36.5 for next year and 11.5 for the following year.
Yeah. But that may vary. So
Results may vary. Does
But
this
also those invasives, they're going to keep growing. So just another 2 years, 4 years out, 5 years out, 6 years out, etc., into eternity. They're vigorous into eternity.
Yeah,
So
I'm thinking we're putting our money into it's almost giving, you know, nature. We can't stop nature is my question, my feeling.
mhm.
What's that saying? Yeah, you can't fight Mother Nature. So yeah.
Well, I think you have to choose whether you want Bailey's Hill to look like it did or whether you want it to look how it could.
Right.
And yes, it can't maintain itself with no input, with no tending, but the requirements get less and less and less as the natives establish themselves.
Well, here's a question that I have, even more of a root, no pun intended question. What was wrong with the before, and why? I mean, if provided you keep on doing the grooming and the dead tree removal and keeping the paths open and passable to bikers and walkers and bird watchers, what was wrong with leaving it, you know, in its wild state other than that?
Well, it's an interesting point. I think open space and recreation is really looking at promoting habitat for, you know, as Pete mentioned a moment ago, birds and so on.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, what happens is that things get choked out. The open space and recreation master plan was very clear about its goals of actually reestablishing native habitat when possible. And this is seen as, you know, it is a major investment, but it's probably the most, I shouldn't say, it's a troubled area. It may not be the most troubled area in Nahant, but it's certainly a highly troubled area in terms of invasive species.
But just again, I want to make sure I understand what we're really asking for here is like $170,000 to be spread over 3 years. I'm taking that as 80 in this first year, And then Lynn, you said 50 and 40.
Well, I might have misspoken. I thought it was 50 and 40, but Paul just gave another set of numbers. I'm frantically looking at the numerous documents that we've been provided.
I can share my screen.
Well, just tell the number, Paul, please. That's
Well,
all I
let's see. So this year's number that's being requested from CPC. Let's see. Subtotal contingency 10%, 78,500.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and then the second year 40,166.
Right.
And the third year, 12,749. That differs from what I said earlier because of a built-in contingency in case things are a little more expensive. So this is top figure, maybe there'll be clawback, but the total is 131,000.5.
Yep.
But isn't about what I would think 114, isn't that just the part of the plant management? The invasives versus the natives. So it seems to me that's the bulk of it. Unless I'm reading this wrong or hearing it wrong.
I'm sorry, I missed your,
Well,
what's your question again?
I'm looking at Tricia's slide and she talks about 82,000 total for the invasive plant management and 31 for the native plant restoration, or 32, which totals up to something like 114,000 over 3 years. So that's the bulk. The native.
Yes, that's the bulk of the figures I gave you. I don't know what else is in there, to tell you the truth. But
project.
that is the bulk of it, yes.
There's some personnel costs.
Yeah.
Is there some lost initiative with what's already been accomplished if we don't keep on with this?
That's a great question. I think so. Yes, I think we've actually begun this down with the one section that you do see immediately when you enter near the Ocean's Edge property. That sort of set a standard. And it's also on the far slope. If you go out to the far slope, the south slope, you'll also see the results of some of the removals. So if we don't, I think there's a risk if we don't continue with what we've actually started and already invested in. At the same time, you could say, well, it's not worth it. And, we don't want to make the investment.
So is the idea that in on and after, in other words, years 4+, is the idea is that the DPW might be doing the work? And have there been discussion with them about whether it's realistic for them to have the hours to do the work?
It's been wonderful to see the enthusiasm of the DPW and their participation in this already. So they have been instrumental in the work that you see at the east slope of Fort Ruckman. And they've already started to actually go into this subject area to open up a trail. If you actually are adventuresome, you'll be able to go over there and see where they've started. But Zach Taylor has been a very strong partner with Open Space on this.
But the idea is the DPW would continue this on and after.
Yes.
And
that is
would
the
need
idea.
To be paid, and would need to be paid to do that, obviously.
Well, it's part of their charge, yes.
Yeah, but there's also a great opportunity here for community participation. There are a lot of people in Nahant who have interests and aspirations about this sort of land reclamation and no experience. And organizations like SWIM and the slowly resuscitating Friends of Bailey's Hill will offer an opportunity for people to see how to go about doing this and to do it together. A wonderful opportunity, I think, for community participation.
I'll tell you something. My husband removed a very good portion with his own hands of the poison ivy with Zach. I was going to volunteer opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, Deborah, we're signing him up right away.
He also got very bad poison ivy afterwards, didn't he, Deborah?
He got poison ivy, but he took it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
guess I want to comment, and this might be a slight change of tone. Although this proposal involves literally forever required funding, I commend you for sort of taking it to the natural edges, so that, you know, yes, it's a lot of money up front, but I see it's a isolated area, so the idea of the non-invasives coming back is much less of a problem there than it would be if it were close to less controlled areas. And you know, I see that quickly diminishing over a few years.
With the birds and the wind, Tim?
Yep. I still think that it's, you know, it's not right next to, it's physically isolated.
I welcome other questions or comments.
Last question, at least last question on my part. Does this require EPA or other permitting?
Not to my knowledge, but I'd be happy to look into it.
So should we move on, committee? Anything else on this? And we should move on to beach access mats. Off we go.
Right. So this was a proposal from the town of Nahant to make several of our beaches accessible for all. So it's a appropriation of $50,000 from fiscal year 25. What it will do is provide the kind of, well, a rollout matting that is suitable for pedestrian and wheelchair access. It is thought to be, it's something that would typically be installed on a seasonal basis, although we do have some of this matting that's been permanently down near the life-saving station restroom complex in the garage for some time. But this would be designed, this would be applied in certain beaches, and beaches that come to mind would be Short Beach, Canoe Beach would be a possibility, as well as there's a beach at the end of Gardner Road that Tony thought of as being a possibility. The other thing that we're looking at is the purchase of a wheelchair that is navigable over these kinds of mats and spaces. We had a lot of discussion about how this would be arranged. Tony spoke about this being on a pre-scheduled basis. You would need to sign up for this. There'd be perhaps, you know, a locking or an access system. There's something that really would have to be worked out to make that wheelchair accessible. But this is actually, at the same time we had this application, we had another application from a private citizen for exactly this kind of program. So we thought it had value, and we are putting it forward for your consideration.
All right, so no questions, but a comment, only because I'm in this situation where my mother is in a wheelchair. And recently we had an event at the life-saving station, and we talked about trying to get her down onto the beach. And obviously in a wheelchair, that's pretty much impossible. I think this is probably, without a doubt, the best thing. There shouldn't need to be any discussion or questions. This would be, you know, this would be great. So that's just my comment. It's something we need desperately.
I think you're absolutely 100% right. I just have a quick question. What is the nature? I love the fact that the matting is seasonal. What's it made of? Is it rubberized, or is it? What?
Yeah, it's rubberized, and it's actually it's quite a firm thing. It's got a sort of interleaving basically rope-like material that holds the slats together.
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, sand
Oh.
passes through it, and
Yeah.
I know that the wheelchairs have big fat wheels on them. I've seen them before.
Yeah.
We, in fact, had we had some, my sister and brother and I had talked about trying to find one where we could rent it. So again, this I think is just a fantastic thing.
I agree. And the ADA, I really appreciate consideration of ADA issues. And that's something that, I hope we think about with all of our projects. But in particular, I agree with you, Peter. This is just, it's excellent. Good thinking.
Could I just add one comment in line with this? My son has some mobility issues, definitely not as many as when he was younger, thanks to therapy. But one of the things that we do every summer is that we volunteer actually through this organization that does surfing for people with disabilities, and they do it right at Short Beach. So I've seen that beach filled with people with disabilities, various kinds. And the reason why they're able to go on the beach is because these mats are there, as well as the wheelchairs, and allowing our community to be way more inclusive is super important. And I appreciate you putting this in.
Thank you.
Where was that, Joy?
On Short Beach every July.
Not short. It's
Oh, I'm sorry, not Short Beach, Long Beach.
Causeway. Yeah, Long Beach.
Long
Causeway.
Beach.
Long Beach.
Long Beach. Yeah.
Sorry, Long Beach.
No. Yeah. So similar style mats are an option here. There's also boardwalk style mats that are considered ADA approved. And I think I believe they also have some of the same ADA wheelchairs, beach wheelchairs available at the Ward Bathhouse too. So very similar to what you're talking about.
It's amazing every year to go and watch people who don't always have the ability to enjoy the water really enjoy it.
Yeah. Glad to hear that. Thank you. Other comments before we scramble on to the next article?
Scramble on, please.
All right. This is the Boulder Scramble at the Forest Playground, along with an interpretive sign kiosk. This was put forward by Kevin Andrews, the principal at Johnson School, along with the town of Nahant, of course. This is for $15,600 to install the Boulder Scramble hardscape feature at this playground. This will address a fairly steep incline. The slope is eroding. The boulders would be used to help reinforce and hold the slope and allow the kids to scramble around, skin their knees, otherwise have a great time. So that's what this one is about. There is a grant of $822 coming in from the Garden Club, which is also all on board with the various sort of naturalistic sort of play areas that have been created over at the Johnson School. I hope you'll all stop by and take a look at that. There would also be a sign kiosk that would be changeable so that, notices could be put up not only about activities at the school, but, watch for this interesting sort of plant that's coming along, or, we've got migratory birds coming in. So it's seen as something that is dynamic and informative.
So I have two questions. The first one is, does this affect insurance at all? And the second one is, are adults allowed to play on it?
Tony, are you still there? Could you address the insurance portion of this? That's beyond my pay grade.
It's town
Well, we
property. I
have
wouldn't-
the town, as far as liability insurance, property insurance, what are you referring
Yeah,
to there?
yeah. So I know if I put a pool in the backyard, I think my liability insurance goes up. So will this affect our, I know it's a small thing, but would it affect our liability insurance?
I don't think it will. No, I don't think it's going to. The way when it comes to the it's called the recreational use statute. It provides a lot of protection for municipalities. And so insurance rates for municipalities are not really adjusted for this sort of thing.
Thank you.
As far as your second question, Tim, I think you are actually entitled to any recreational activity that you choose to undertake. Although do it safely and
wear a helmet.
And bring your own Band-Aids. Bring your own Band-Aids. Other questions or comments? All right, well then I've got a series of other articles. They're really housekeeping, we labeled them housekeeping articles. The first one is that we appropriate every year $10,000 for administrative and operating costs. We very seldom use it all, but some of it helps pay for our annual sort of fee to the Community Preservation Coalition. We also help fund the printing of the town warrant, which I think is a useful thing to fund. The other three articles here are basically bond costs. The first one is the debt service on a $350,000 bond that was taken for the Town Hall and Green Lawn Cemetery entrance. This would be a payment of $60,000 for the third year on that bond. The next one is debt service on a $500,000 bond. It will be $52,000 towards this, and it's the fourth year of a bond that was taken for the public library. And then the last was a $400,000 bond, again, related to the public library. This would be a sum of $40,000 for the fifth year of bond payments. And then there's a catch-all article that says, if there's anything left over, it goes into the general reserve account, because sometimes we don't know exactly how much match we're going to be getting from the state. And that gets put into the general reserve. Before I go on to the next lot, do any questions about these? All right, then we'll look at the next item, which is a series of clawbacks. These are grants that have been out, they've been expended, there's a little bit of money left. We're just trying to clean it up. We are really all benefited by the work of Allison Nieto, who keeps such careful records of things. It becomes quite easy for us to understand where things stand with various projects and what can be brought back. Do you want me to go through these individually, or are you content to say Vio con Dios?
Yeah, I think we're good. I mean, we do this every year, and
it's housekeeping and gut, and thanks for keeping track of.
Sure. So the total that we're pulling back is just over $8,000.
and that. So actually, I do have a question then. I guess so. Does the $8,000 go? It goes back into your kind of account.
Yes.
Or
it goes,
the CPC fund, general fund?
It goes into the general reserve.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right. Are we good?
So that's my report.
And
yes.
Do it. All right. Administrative question. I believe last year, Lynn, you published almost a separate booklet, or at least all your detail was not included in the FinCom booklet. Are we going to do that again this year?
I don't know, I'm showing you what was done last year. I believe so. Tony, are you there? We love doing it like this.
Yes. Plan is
Yeah.
to do it the same way as we did last year.
Excellent.
Sometimes I would like to say I'd like to be released from doing the entire summary of, 20 years of community preservation funding. At the same time, it's really helpful to have it to look back at, see
Yeah.
what we decided to do and why we did it.
Yeah. And it's a very subtle way of blowing your own horn too.
Right.
Well, thank you, but I'd rather not have my horn blown, if that's what you
Well,
mean.
as to horn blowing, though, I have to say, from having been to CPC meetings all this year, and you could see with our discussions tonight about all these issues, the detail with which everyone on the committee goes into every proposal is really extraordinary. And so I want you to understand that when we talk about the proposals, it's in part that we've heard so much detail that you spend. So it's much appreciated and very impressive. Wow. I mean, the details about how much for this, thank you.
We really appreciate how labor intensive your work is.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Lynn, question, is your committee going to be recommending all of these articles?
Yes, these are the articles we're putting forward for the town meeting, for the town warrant.
So there aren't going to be any that aren't recommended by you?
Oh, yes, we rejected a couple.
Yes.
A couple were withdrawn. Yeah. And
But
Yeah.
but I mean, none of the rejected ones are going to be put forward at town meeting.
no.
No.
This represents their recommendations after
Right.
calling through and discussing all the applications.
Yeah, I think I said at the onset there was $900,000 worth of request. We're now down to $500,000 of recommendations, which include about 140,000, maybe $150,000 of, bonded obligations. So we have to be careful. We will be drawing from the general reserve for the Little League lighting, as well as drawing down some of the housing reserve to fund that $60,000 study. So we will end up still maintaining about $120,000 in the general reserve and a little bit less in the housing. Let me see, in the housing reserve, we will leave in, we'll have $36,000 left in the housing reserve.
Well, Lynn, for inclusion in our book,
Mhm.
you have done, or somebody has done, a very simple short analysis that is basically picture a table, and the columns in the table are the various categories of CPC. So, historic preservation, open space, blah, 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 blah. And then each of the rows are opening balance, town contribution, state match, which are additions to each of those categories, and then the various articles without any explanation of them, just kind of the title of the article, and that gets you to the ending balance in each of the categories.
Mhm.
Can you do that for inclusion in our book?
I was planning to.
Excellent. Okay. All right.
All right.
All right. Any further questions, comments, discussion with CPC?
Lynn, really great job. Thank your team. Really professional stuff. Makes it easy to get arms around it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Well, we've got a wonderful committee, but we do have some open slots. So if anyone would like to join,
Come right up.
come on in.
Wait a minute. We have an open slot too.
Yes. Yeah.
No, we're not exchanging.
Yeah.
But thank you very, very much. This discussion has been very fruitful for me. I've made many notes. I've actually started to sort of really think about how we can strengthen the supporting statements that help the townspeople and everyone understand the rationale behind some of these articles. So I really deeply appreciate your input and comments tonight.
Excellent. So again, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. I'm heading home.
All right.
Are
And
you continuing?
yes, we're continuing for what I think will be a short time. So
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Have a great rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Very much, Lynn.
I believe we have minutes to approve and public forum if there's any public left. So we have one set of minutes to approve, which would be, I believe, the minutes of the 26th. That was a subtle way of saying, will somebody please make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the 26th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? So I'm going to do this in Zoom order. Tim?
And this is the amended version that was sent out more recently. I say aye.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Joy?
I wasn't able to attend the meeting, so I'm going to abstain.
Right, you were not. That's good. Good call, Peter.
Aye.
Barbara? Barbara?
She's saying aye, she's muted.
I know she's raising her hand. That's an aye. Dan?
I have to abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Yes, good call. Thank you. Deborah?
Aye.
And Bob votes aye. So that's what? Three abstentions and
Two
two abstentions.
abstentions.
Yeah, okay, you got it. Public forum, I don't see anyone.
Actually, I'm sorry, did you ask Melanie?
Oh, I'm sorry, Melanie.
Aye.
When you go through this, try to do this in Zoom order, they move the people around on you. So I apologize. And somehow you seem to get moved a lot. All right, then. We were kicking around the idea. Oh, that's all right. Other news from my meeting with Tony and Allison earlier today. They have met with the printer, and the printer has gone back to their original date of the 19th. So I think we're okay with having a Thursday meeting for next week. And the intent of that meeting will be to go through and vote as many of the articles as we can. And if we can't, to be very succinct about what are the open items and who is responsible for chasing those open items.
This will include the CPC sub-articles as well.
This will include the CPC sub-articles as well. Yes. Yeah, and I'll add those to the list that I sent out earlier.
So Bob, does that mean next week we have to have a recommendation drafted for the assignments you gave us for the articles?
No. And I guess technically I should say it may be hard to write the recommendation without the vote, but for most of these, assume that they are going to pass. And I think we all know what the somewhat controversial ones are. So if you have one of the more controversial ones, you may not want to spend a whole ton of time trying to write prose. But for like chapter 90 and those sorts of articles, I think you're perfectly safe.
Bob, could you send us, or do you have it in our docs, public docs, the list of the assignments?
Yeah, I sent it earlier today, and it will be in the Dropbox folder shortly.
Sorry, I didn't see it.
Oh, that's okay. It, it was late this afternoon. Is that all?
Sorry about this is another new person question. So we're going to vote the articles next week. Then what?
All right, so next week, we're going to go through that list of articles. And, basically, we're going to ask whoever the sponsor or the responsible person for that article is to make a motion, which has to be seconded. We discuss it, and then we have a vote as to how what we want to do. Do we want to recommend it? Do we want to not recommend it? Or in rare cases, we may do something that's no recommendation, which is more like, we either think it's not our responsibility to have a recommendation in this case, or we're just so equally divided that we can't come to a consensus. Tim, you're giving that look.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. It happens that you're the big person on my Zoom screen right now. Right. And then the following week, what we typically do is we will read everyone's recommendation and wordsmith it. So that it's kind of an interesting meeting where it's a collective proofreading writing exercise. And
We've gotten pretty good at it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. I think routinely where we've spent the time on the final result has been far better than the original draft.
Right. And some of the drafts are just drafts we take from prior years, which is, you look at the book and things like transfers, and I'm trying to think, it's usually the first couple of articles are copy and paste type of thing where
Ice
we
and
make
snow.
Yeah, ice and snow, even the trash. I think enterprise trash, enterprise water, they're pretty standard. We basically say, yes, this is what we're going to go with.
We sank a lot of time into short-term rentals last time, remember?
Well, yeah, I mean, generally, it's going to, anything that's going to be controversial, we're going to spend more time on it because we're trying to, as I said earlier, this committee's job is not just to look at the finances, but to look at the overall, the overall town and the benefits or not benefits to the town. So,
And that's what we were doing tonight.
right.
I mean, that's why we went into such detail tonight. That's our job, to
Yep.
ask those kind of hard questions. That's what we're
Yep.
supposed to do.
Exactly. Exactly. Did that help, Melanie? Did I actually answer your question?
Yes, I know what to expect for the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
All right. And don't set aside pride of authorship a little bit. So don't get, some people get kind of upset if there's suggestions made as to changing your
Right.
my brilliant prose,
Yeah. I spent hours on that one sentence, and it's and I think I guess I'll call myself a veteran. This is what, my third or fourth year maybe. But one of the things that I've discovered is that simplification, like you have to, we know all this information. We've been discussing it for weeks and weeks and weeks. People coming to town meeting have literally a single paragraph to look at, and we need to make that paragraph simple enough that they're going to read it, and kind of get the information they need to make a good decision.
Yeah, exactly. So I see it as there's two parts to it. One is we need to frame up the issue in a way that people can understand. And two, once we've accomplished number one, number two is we need to provide our recommendation as to
Right.
what we would do and why.
Right.
All right, I think I'm feeling like I'm pontificating here.
Time to get off your soapbox,
I
Bob.
move to adjourn.
I was just gonna say that.
I'll second that.
I was just going to say that. All right, all in favor, Barbara.
Aye.
Melanie, you haven't moved this time.
Bye.
Joy,
Yes.
Deborah.
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Kim,
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Bob votes aye. So thank you all. I will see you next week. Same
Next
time.
Thursday.
Next
Thursday.
Thursday,
I'm
exactly.
sorry.
Thursday, we don't
Wait.
need Tuesday, right? Okay.
Before who seconded? I
Peter,
thank you.
No Tuesday next week, right?
right?
Yeah, no Tuesday next week.
Right, Thursday.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you. Everybody have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
You too. Take care.
Happy Easter if you
Happy
celebrate.
Easter,
Easter.
yes.
Too.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.